Hello and welcome to the February 6th Helm developer meeting. My name is Robert. I'll be your moderator for this event. This is a CNCF project, and this does follow the CNCF guidelines for code of conduct, excuse me. And it is being recorded. If you don't want to be recorded, please fall off now. You can watch the recording later. And let's get started. First order of business is any announcements. I have nothing posted, but to the floor, do we have any announcements?
Yes. I think just I probably should have added this in here, but we mentioned it in the past, but I think it's worth mentioning again that we have a timeline for the last feature release of Helm 3.18. And you can just look in the past meeting notes for the dates. Just letting folks know that basically we've got 1 month from tomorrow to get new feature pull requests merged in time for the release candidate for 3.18. And that will be the last feature release. And then for Helm 3, there'll be lots of new features added to Helm 4, which we're working on. And of course, Helm 3 will be, there's a whole timeline for support, like an entire year for, patch and security bug fixes and security fixes.
Do you guys see that there's any use in putting new features in Helm 3? Does that make sense? Because it's only going to be in the final, I don't know. What do you guys think?
We just have a timeline for it. We wanted to get, there's a lot of open PRs, and so there's really just, what is it, 3 months? Basically, we gave since the last scheduled feature, or the last scheduled minor release.
It probably means a lot to the makers of some of those PRs, I guess.
All
so
right.
It's everyone's opportunity to come to these meetings, bring your favorite pull requests for like getting folks' maintainers' attention. You can do legwork by helping to test them, making sure that if they're bug fixes, making sure that they have reproducible steps for the feature. So maintainers don't waste time having to reason about it. We can spend most of our time just reviewing the code. So.
That is a good topic. Maybe we should bring that up. What does it take to streamline us to improve things easier, right? Kind of have a checklist. Good point there, Scott. All right, since there is no other announcements, let's move into discussion. Scott, you're first up with the H4 update, met with Flux maintainers about Helm plugins design proposal, immediate implication for SDK users who do not allow running arbitrary executables. Scott, the floor is yours, sir.
Correct. So so this is we've said in past meetings that several of us are working like hard in different pieces of this. So I won't get into all of that now. I think I gave the last shout out. I said in the last meeting, I said some of that. For now, this is just an update that we're also not only have been considering SDK users, but are also really asking SDK users, like heavy SDK users, what would you need in order for this WASM plugin architecture that we're working on to work for you? And we don't have definite answers, but there are definitely some pretty sure no's. Already, for example, Flux is highly security minded, so it doesn't just allow a container with running arbitrary executables. You can build your own, but the project itself won't just call out to those. So that's why it builds in its own post render, or a supported post render. And if you have other, which is customized patches, and if you have others, it will build those. And WASM plugins, though, are going to be a different story. We shouldn't expect that SDK projects will have to pull all of those packages in, because you can actually write WASM plugins in different languages. It's a polyglot solution. So the default Helm plugins, this isn't set in stone, but we're pretty sure it's going to write those and go, right? So write those and go lang. But so that would be possible. But if we want to use the plugin architecture like we're planning, they would have to call them. And so we've just, we've just discussed some things like having a set location, for example, where users can mount additional plugins, versus having perhaps a whitelist where the Helm team actually like reviews well-known plugins for security implications, and and then basically SE can rely on that. Yeah.
I'm gonna jump in here, Scott. You have a lot of great ideas, so I think we might want to table that until we can have a broader discussion on that, because just makes the ease of time for other people who have items. But is this something we can do in a one-off meeting about this? Because I know you have a HIP. I don't believe your HIP has been approved yet, but
that's the high level.
Okay.
Essentially, those were just some examples, so folks can just get a sense of the relevance of this. And that's it. Yeah, we can definitely table, or we can pin it if we have time at the end of this for more discussion. If you want to get to the other topics.
Yep. We have a new individual here. I've not met this person, Marcin. A way forward for 13627 undefined behavior. Marcin, the floor is yours. Welcome, first of all.
Hi, my name is Marcin. I'm here with the Stackbox project hat on. I joined the meeting a couple of times before, but that was long ago. So a bit of a background. Stackbox is a security solution for Kubernetes, and we have a pretty complex, I would say overly complex Helm chart to install the various services that Stackbox comprises of. And this was before my time. And the people who implemented this no longer work at Red Hat, so there's no one to ask. But certain resources, in particular some secrets, which contains TLS certificates and storage-related resources, are installed as hooks in order to kind of disown them from the chart and make sure Helm doesn't delete them in case the user deletes the Helm release by mistake, just to make like three times as possible, to make super sure that users don't lose their data. And it turns out that the way we use it is actually undefined. It seems somebody invented a hook delete policy value of never, which does exactly what we want, but it's not documented and seems to work just by accident. That it means these resources will never be deleted and recreated. So it seems we have coded up, maybe not into a corner. I haven't really figured out how to get away from the situation. Perhaps, like George suggested, stop using hooks and just rely on hook delete, not hook delete policy, on, what was it, resource policy keep. But what I'm asking is that Helm doesn't change how it deals with this undocumented hook delete policies behind our back, and doesn't suddenly cause people deleting their resources after a Helm upgrade. Yes.
I'm thinking this if there's undocumented behaviors, is it worth, within the Helm 3 timeline, getting in tests that would preserve those behaviors, at least? What do you think? Like, then they would be preserved, right? Because Helm is never going to break Helm 4 is not going to break any Helm 3 going forward. That's
that would be awesome.
So, yeah, but maybe it would be on you or people to get some tests in for the things you really want to protect.
Yeah, I can definitely contribute to tests.
Any other comments to this topic?
I think we should look at whether, like, if hook delete policy never is a thing in Helm's code, then we should probably. It's not.
No.
Yeah.
Well, I'm kind of surprised as to how
it happens to work in a way as if it was.
So if Helm is just not processing hooks because it has an arbitrary string that it doesn't understand,
It processes the hooks. This is the delete policy, if I understand right. When to delete the manifest that's for the hook.
Mhm.
And if I understand it, there's 3 delete policies that are there today. If it encounters one of those, it follows those. But if it encounters a policy with a different name that's just not one of those 3s, it just never deletes anything. So you use never right now, but this is just my brief look at the code. I don't remember it really well. But if I came up with and just put foobar in there, the same thing would happen. It's just by happenstance that it works this way. So it's more of making this an explicit defined documented behaviors, which you're asking for. So say in Helm 4, we don't remove it.
Yeah, because if there's none, it looks like it defaults to before hook creation. So you have to just put some sort of, like you said, Matt, gobbledygook or whatever in there so it doesn't do that.
Yeah. So I would also
Matt, it sounds
propose that for Helm 4 maybe we should or should not do this. It may break existing charts. It would be good to error on a hook policy which is not understood, but that can be discussed later. But we should also figure out what to do with Marston's situation of currently treating it as a never.
At the very least,
I'm driving, so I can't raise my hand.
Sorry.
But well, maybe that should actually be documented in the HIP, because I think there is a HIP for the deletion hooks. Document it in the HIP that's the expected behavior, and put in tests for it, and that seems like that would be and maybe even actually add it to the documentation.
Well, it seems to me like there might be times when you want to have preserved behaviors to not break anything, but you don't actually want to document them as, or at least you'd want to document them as not the standard way to do things, maybe, I would think. And it also brings up the point that in Helm 4, I suspect that we'll have cases where we actually do break behavior, and then people will report it, and then we'll have to actually go back and make that behavior that exists now that people have depended on. That, I've definitely found things in Helm that were not documented. So,
okay. So I believe our way forward is to possibly put a HIP to this, and then document what we have. And for Helm 4, look at properly document or properly implementing it the correct way versus if it doesn't meet one of those 3 deletion criterias, just leave it versus making it a little more explicit, like having it be able to be set to like never if you want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I just wanted to mention that I mean, unless someone other maintainers object, I don't see any problem with documenting the current behavior.
No,
we don't have to really decide on it, or putting a note on that in the documentation. At least I don't think that we need to decide on a convention in order to do that, or a change.
No, documenting how it currently works should be, but
documenting something that's not intentional, right? That makes it a lot harder to change because now it's intentional. And in Helm 4, we have to do a lot of work for preservation. How do we want to handle this? Once we document it that way in Helm 3, then we're going to be put in a position of preserving it in Helm 4 in that way, or we break things. So that's my only thing. I think this needs a spike to go dig into, because I don't know this code, so I can't talk about what we might want to do or not do in the future.
I agree with Robert's proposal that a HIP is probably the right way forward to to put the options on the table where we can discuss.
Totally.
Yeah,
that's exactly what I was thinking, was that like documenting them is probably the wrong thing, but testing them, at least we know what we're up against, right? So if we do have the test, we could break those going forward, knowing what we're up against, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
just tests were more valuable than doc here.
Just to be very clear on what I meant is documenting the unintended behavior, not saying this is how it should work, but just often see note currently this is the way that it works. There's nothing wrong with that. I wouldn't personally probably prioritize it, but that's just what I meant.
Yeah.
Joe has his hand up.
Yeah, I was thinking that the whole idea of opening a PR against the HIP, assuming there is a HIP for this, I haven't looked, but I mean that's where we have this discussion, right? That's how we decide whether is this the behavior we want or isn't it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
So I think the best our takeaway is to open up a HIP. Marcin, if you can take the point on that one, and then feel free to tag any of all of us in that, and we'd love to put our thoughts to it.
Yes.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Karen, you're up next. Afternoon shifts at Helm Project booth for KubeCon EU. Who will be there and can help out? Karen, the floor is yours.
You pretty much read it. That's the question. If you will be at KubeCon, can you just drop your name in the notes so I know who to reach out to when I create a schedule for our booth. Yeah.
I'll be there.
That was okay. There we go. Okay, cool. We can do this passively. You can move on to the next item. Thanks.
Awesome. George, Helm Create plus Gateway API PR reminders is PR 12912. Let me copy that. I will put this on the notes. Floor is yours, sir.
Anybody wants to also approve this? It's a PR to Helm Create. It was slightly contentious at some point because Gateway API is not part of the core Kubernetes distribution, but it is an official part of Kubernetes. I think it's been discussed enough that it's not contentious, and it just needs a approval from someone who agrees
I
with
can review it this afternoon, George.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. All right, next up, Engie, new YAML script org site is live. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. I mentioned last week that I was working on a new site layout, and I put it up yesterday. It's with the thing of release early, release often. So it's not how I want it to look in a month, but I think it's a lot more usable. Also, was working with Scott on DevOps use cases and want to add a lot of those to those, including Helm use cases and maybe a whole full section on Helmwise. This might be a good way to get that across. That's all.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you, sir. Next topic up is from me. Two-factor authentication for the Helm org on GitHub. Other CNCF projects have it. I know I can tell you right now, KubeWarden has it. We do not. We did have a spam last week that installed hundreds of issues. I might be exaggerating, probably less than 100. But a lot of issues that were open, spamming our instance, whether it makes sense to turn on two-factor authentication. Question to the group.
It was, for the record, it was thousands of issues. But I do have a question. So does this require anybody who interacts with the Helm org to have MFA enabled, or is it just the maintainers?
Just the maintainers. Anyone who's a member of the org would be affected. Any contributor who would be submitting an issue or chatting on it should not be affected.
Didn't Google do this 2FA site-wide already for everybody? Or GitHub, didn't they enable it?
Currently, sir, it is not enabled for us, and we might have been legacy. But like I said, I know KubeWarden has it. There's a few other CNCF projects that have it. Whether it makes sense to,
yeah. Oh yes, we should definitely have it.
Yeah,
all of us.
Yeah, well, yeah, yes. I probably should have said that. I'm all for more security, two-factor. I mean, I already have.
Okay. Any objectors?
100%.
All right.
Yeah, I just don't know.
I think that would not have stopped the spam attack, though. That would not.
No, well, what I said, I started off saying it. I knew it wouldn't have done anything to the spam attack, but just to up our security posture, act like a big organization that we are, should we enable it? So I think we're all in agreement. Thank you, everybody. And next,
my question, Robert, was I think you
sure.
said you reported it, and I asked in the maintainers chat, but I don't. Maybe you answered, but I don't know if I saw it. I think you can report per user, as well, and they were not all individual users. There were many of them were repeat. I wondered, did we need help doing that somehow, like using the API to I was going to offer to do that and just do the reporting if we have
So
it.
with those users, at least when I got to the last batch of them, I reported each individual user that
You
came
did.
across. There were only about 6 users in total. So it actually wasn't that hard. It was repeat user accounts.
Great.
They were all reported. By the way, I just dropped in a link to chat here. As of March 2023, GitHub required all users who contribute code to github.com to enable one or more forms of two-factor authentication. So it doesn't require everybody, but everybody who contributes code must enable it.
Okay. All right. Real quick, our next one up is George. How can we make the progress on HIP reviews? The floor is yours, sir.
So yeah, very quickly, there's a bunch of HIPs out there. I think people have been reviewing them on and off. I don't know what our intention is, Matt, to kind of circle these up and get like a concrete list for Helm 4.
Yeah, I was hoping to do a lot of that already. Unfortunately, the day job got very busy for a few weeks and that distracted me. You'll see my GitHub activity kind of tank for a few weeks, and I was actually working the whole time. So I plan on diving into things more. I was working on them yesterday. I'll be spending time on it this afternoon. So I'm going to try to go in and start curating and working on some of these so we can figure out what to do, since for Helm 4, that falls to me. So I apologize for my absence, but I'm back in the saddle and working on them. Yesterday, I worked on GitHub or on Helm. Today, I'll be working on HIPs.
Definitely appreciate. I think it shouldn't just fall to you though. Potentially, I feel like a more.
Oh no, sorry. As the release engineer on Helm 4, some of this falls to me. That's why.
Certainly, I was just thinking do we more of a community effort to try and get these reviewed and
So,
comments answered.
George, you seem passionate. You brought it up. If you can list like one or like stack rank them. If there's one in, if you're like, hey, you brought up the topic. So if there's one that's hotter than the other, probably goes for you too, Scott. If you want to list them in there and say, hey, it's documented, go back into the notes, and if someone can look at it, like just reminders for myself, Andrew, Joe, Matt.
Or I can.
Like, hey, look at this one today, please.
Should I create a doc with the existing PRs and HIPs and kind of like comment about status, and so that people can come in and look at if they want to review HIPs, there's like a more curated list of things to look at and current progress. Would that be a good idea?
I think that could be helpful if you have the bandwidth. When we talked about the bug script stuff earlier, I mentioned, hey, this is what has worked. Something like that has worked on other projects. Yeah, but that only works if someone has the bandwidth to do it and kind of keep it updated. So if you do, great. Yeah.
I also set up a HIP review session. I think we were going to do this previously and it kind of fell off the calendar again. So I'll do a ring around and Helm maintainers for a good time. And then I don't think I can ask the whole world. I think Ingi, you're interested as well. So I'll try and find some time where it might suit yourself, and maybe some time, like a spot on the calendar to review things might help people too.
All right, so we got about 4 minutes left here. As we move on, Matt, you have added one, Matt Farina, -v versus double -debug for CLI flags. The floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, so I'll try to be quick with it. Helm has long gone with --debug, and you could do things like --trace, things like that for its output. Right now, we're working on the logging that Evans has put together to look at the CLI flags for this, and he's proposed using -v, which is what kubectl and some other tools use. You see a big divide in the CLI community around what's the appropriate thing to use here. And so I wanted to bring up the topic here. It's a little bit of a color of the bike shed one, but it's one of those things that we should talk about. How do we want to move forward with the naming conventions, and how do we want to approach this kind of output?
Me personally, having it aligned to since Kubernetes is kind of the project we tie into tightly, I would say try to align to that. So from a user experience, V in one is V in the other. So that's just my 2 cents. I'll shut up.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've traditionally tried to do is not follow Kubernetes, because Kubernetes gets so much crap for a poor user experience, especially for people who aren't hardcore Kubernetes people. So one of the goals has been to provide a better user experience than what Kubernetes does, because it gets so many complaints. And so that has been one of the intentional philosophies of the past. You know, we as people who work on Kubernetes all the time, sometimes don't realize it, but like you get to the application developers, you may just grab a chart and install it in the cluster so they can work on their application next to it. They complain a lot about Kubernetes. And what we see is, and have got normalized to with the Kubernetes UX, they look at and they just cringe and they can't stand it. They go to conferences on app development and they talk about it. So mirroring that blindly, I don't think is a great idea because of how many people complain about it.
So debug also doesn't have to be a true false Boolean flag. You could have debug and have an optional verbosity level where the default is debug level, and you could go beyond that if you specify an integer or something else.
Or debug plugin, right? So I mean, it's not level necessarily, but kind of.
Yeah, a lot of this has to do with leveling. Most of the tools have it. I mean, I would not suggest we invent a new way to do this, right? Debug and then a plugin and then all these specifications that are not normal things to do, but in order to just follow what's consistently out there, because otherwise we create a difficult UX for people to figure out.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Everything you're saying, Matt. This is exactly what I thought when I first started using Helm as well.
So I'm not suggesting which path we should use. I'm providing history here and asking folks' opinions on this. So Evans, you've got an opinion. You came off camera, came off mute.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I did, yeah, from my dungeon. Yeah, so what prior to using Kubernetes and whatnot, I was used to using log levels, and you'll see that in Python and also of other ecosystems, which say log level, and then you pass in either info, debug, whatnot. I don't know whether that's something we should consider or it's a thought around that path. Not sure, just adding more options to the already confusing options that we have.
Hey. Well, we have 1 minute left. I do apologize. I don't want to be rude, but I also want to be respectful of everyone's time here. So for assignments for next call, do I have a volunteer for moderator?
I can moderate.
All right, we have George, notes. I can do it if no one else. Oh,
I'll do it.
Scott's got notes. Evans, issue triage, are you going to be there? Are you in there?
Yeah, I could do that. But I'll try to put more time.
All right. I'm going to try to do PRs myself personally, but I'm going to put a focus this till next week on HIP reviews.
I'll do that too.
Yeah, and Evans, we can work out that discussion on the HIP review for the flags.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
We're at time. I want to thank everybody, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, Robert.
Thanks.
Thank you. Have a good week.